Good morning, everybody. Calva Daddy here. Before we jump into the video, I just want to say sorry for my uncharacteristically long pause from videos. You see, I've been on summer break from school and I've just been trying to take advantage of the outdoors and stuff like that. So sorry about the gap between videos. I promised I would be here every weekend, but I went back on that promise. So my bad. Anyway, this is the last video in the series of the murder of Bill J. Pumpernickel. Let's jump right on in. This is Chapter 7, Nowhere Else to Roam. So as you know, as we left off 2 weeks ago, they finally caught Paul Edgewood. Paul Edgewood tried to escape. He was shot in the leg. He was dragged to a jailhouse. And after a couple days of healing, he's now ready to go. So it is now January of 1890 and Paul Edgewood is in custody, and they have just been absolutely drilling this guy, trying to get info about where the last piece of the puzzle, their last suspect, Nathan Andreessen, is hiding. They knew that the two had to be close together because since Paul Edgewood was arrested in Nevada, they could only assume that Nathan Andreessen was also in Nevada. In early January of 1890, while Paul Edgewood was still in custody, one of the lead inspecting officers asked Paul Edgewood a very simple question: who killed Bill J. Pumpernickel? And Paul Edgewood had a lot to say about that. It went something like this. George Clint dropped them off outside of Bill J. Pumpernickel's house outside. According to Paul, they went down in that little escape route that I mentioned, went in his house, and then they stayed there for about 2 hours while Bill J. Pumpernickel was away giving a press conference. When Pumpernickel returned home, Nathan Andreessen, with his gun, fled into the kitchen while Paul Edgewood fled upstairs. Paul Edgewood said from the balcony, being very quiet, he saw Pumpernickel take off his trench coat and shoes and walk upstairs. This was Paul Edgewood's moment to attack. While Bill J. Pumpernickel had his back turned, according to Paul, he grabbed Pumpernickel from the front and kind of started tugging him, punching at him, and wrestling at him. Finally, they fell down the stairs, and Bill tried to run away because at 61, Bill J. Pumpernickel was still pretty strong for his age. However, Pumpernickel was restrained by Paul, and they were kind of both sitting against this stair banister like this. Pretend I'm Paul Edgewood, and he's kind of holding Pumpernickel like this, and Pumpernickel's trying to escape. And that's when Paul said Nathan Andreessen emerged from the kitchen with his gun loaded, put the gun right to Bill J. Pumpernickel's head, reportedly said, quote unquote, "see you in hell," and pulled the trigger. Police finally knew after almost 3 years of searching that Nathan Andreessen was the one who pulled the trigger and ultimately killed Bill J. Pumpernickel. He was the one who they wanted the most. On January 14th, 1890, they finally get Paul Edgewood to crack that Nathan Andreessen is hiding in Wild Grove, Nevada, a kind of small, deserty town with a population of about 300. So the police began another search team. And Paul Edgewood is sitting there like, okay, I guess I'm just going to be left here. And one of the officers turns to him and says, "Oh no, buddy, you're coming with us." And he was like, "Oh, okay then." So a shackled Paul Edgewood by the wrists is loaded onto a police buggy, and the team sets off to Wild Grove, Nevada. According to Paul Edgewood on the journey over, he last heard from Nathan Andreessen the day he was arrested. And according to Nathan, he was planning to catch a train to go down to southern Wild Grove, which is kind of an exclave of the Wild Grove, about 10 miles south. So, on October 16th, 1890, the search team finally arrived in Wild Grove. It was a little town kind of right at the border of California and Nevada, and the team basically sets out to look for Paul Edgewood. Sorry, not Paul Edgewood, Nathan Andreessen. Sorry, I misspoke. So The team arrived at about 9:30 in the morning, so they had plenty of time to search before it got dark. With Paul Edgewood, who knew obviously the most about Nathan, he was able to reluctantly give him clues, because while Paul Edgewood was giving them clues, he had a gun pointed to his temple. So he had to comply. Even Paul Edgewood, excuse me, was afraid of guns. So finally, Paul leads the investigators to like this unsurprising small little apartment. He says, okay, Nathan is in room 300 on the top floor. He may have a gun, so just beware. A team, which included Paul Edgewood, waited at the door while a team of about 5 policemen went up the stairs to confront Nathan Andreessen. They pounded at the door of room 300. However, getting no answer, they broke it down and they went right into the bedroom. And according to one officer, a quote-unquote 20-something surprised young man kind of flipped around and said, "What the hell?" like that. The officers knew right away that that was Nathan Andreessen. According to one officer, he had long hair, kind of like my length, a thin but prominent mustache, and he was a lot shorter than they expected. He was about 5'8" or 5'9". They could see Nathan Andreessen had a revolver in his hand. According to Paul Edgewood, that was the same revolver used to end Bill Pumpernickel's life. Nathan Andreessen did not immediately surrender. However, at the probe of a gun, he was ordered to drop his weapon and get down on his knees with his hands up. Nathan Andreessen, that day, was arrested. As he was being led down the stairs in handcuffs, he was face to face with Paul Edgewood. The two locked eyes and they said, "It's over. It's over." The two criminals were carted back to Rattlesnake County, where they arrived back there on January 19th, 1890. When they got there, the crowds were beaming. After almost 3 years of unrest, fearing that these killers are on the loose, both of them were finally caught. George Clinton would have been apprehended if he didn't blow himself away the previous August. Nathan Andreessen and Paul Edgewood were held at a city-county jailhouse until their trial was set to begin. On May 27th, 1890, the trial for Nathan Andreessen and Paul Edgewood finally began, and it lasted for about 3 weeks. And actually took the jury a fair amount of time to deliberate. It took them about 2 days, which was quite worrisome for Jack Robinson and Tom Richards, who feared that, like, maybe they didn't have enough evidence, maybe they screwed something up. And what was interesting, they even tried the deceased George Clinton. Like, they obviously didn't have, like, his body, and they didn't have his urn where he was cremated in, so they just simply, like, said, like, we sentence George Clinton to 15 plus years of criminal involvement, which is what the sentence he would have gotten if he was alive. Paul Edgewood was up first. The jury came out. We, the jury, and the above entitled action find the defendant, Mr. Paul Edgewood, guilty of criminal assistance and murder, and we hereby sentence him to 45 years to life in the state penitentiary. Paul Edgewood, after exchanging one last glance with Nathan Andreessen, was led away where he would likely be locked up for the rest of his life. Now it was Nathan's turn. We, the jury, and the above entitled action find the defendant, Mr. Nathan Andreessen, guilty of capital first-degree murder and will be sentenced to life in prison in the state penitentiary. That was it. The date was June 9th, 1890. The killers have been justified. Oh, but no. That isn't where our story ends. Oh, no. You see, Bill J. Pumpernickel's son, Bill J. Pumpernickel III, ran for mayor in 1890 and won. He assumed office on January 5th, 1891. I'm going to sneeze again. Never mind. So, and During his 9 years as mayor from 1891 to 1900, he vowed to get better security for mayors, and that was obviously to prevent assassinations like what they did to his father. So in the summer of 1894, Bill J. Pumpernickel III signs into law that the act of killing a authority figure or mayor was punishable by death. And that was bad news for poor Mr. Nathan Andreasen, who obviously pulled the trigger that very night. In September of 1894, Nathan Andreasen was informed that he would be executed, and his sentence would be changed from life to death. On October 11th, 1894, on a cloudy, rainy day, in the presence of both Paul Edgewood and Bill J. Pumpernickel III, Nathan Andreasen was hung in a gallows outside in the prison yard. He was 28 years old. His life was finally over. He could harm nobody no longer. But our story still isn't over. Paul Edgewood was still serving a life term in prison. In 1906, the jail he was staying at caught fire, and Paul Edgewood was evacuated. And for a couple months from 1906 to 1907, Paul Edgewood was briefly able to walk as a free man before the jail was repaired and he was put back in jail. And during the 19-teens and the 1920s, Paul Edgewood gave several interviews explaining why he did it, how he did it. And the interviewers said that they heard no remorse in the man's voice. Paul Edgewood's life came to a close on July 17th, 1933, when the 67-year-old murderer died of a blood clot in the brain. But our story still isn't over. On the anniversary of Bill J. Pumpernickel's murder in 1976, Rattlesnake County Mayor Larry Friedman III named October 27th a National Day of Remembrance for their fallen mayor, who gave so much to their town only to be killed. From the 1980s to the 1990s, all sites of historical importance to the murder, the house where Pumpernickel was killed at, the various escape routes were all preserved and are now popular tourist attractions in Rattlesnake County. And ever since the murder, protection of the mayor has gone up by over 40%, meaning bodyguards, stuff like that. Now we have a brief epilogue. So Jack Richards, one of the main investigators, passed away in 1902 of tuberculosis shortly after publishing his memoir detailing of the murder. Jack Robinson remained a vocal figure in the police force before dying in 1928 of a heart attack. And that is it for the murder of Bill J. Pumpernickel. Guys, this has been an amazing series. I hope you have enjoyed my videos, and I'll see you this summer for some new Calvadaddy stuff. Calvadaddy out.